Okay. All right. Let me get going on the intro, and then we will get the interview underway. Oliver Tree, back at it again. All right. Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Hope you're doing well. And it's time for an exclusive conversation and interview with the one and only Mr. Oliver Tree, a producer, songwriter, singer, auteur, meme master, visual artist too. His new record, Alone in the Crowd, is dropping just tomorrow. And so if you're hanging around at midnight or chilling on one of our New Music Friday streams, we're most likely going to listen to it. We got a lot of people in chat anticipating this new full-length LP. We're hoping to get into that album and anything else that comes up in the conversation. First off, I just want to say, Oliver, thank you for coming through.
Thank you for having me. You look dapper today, sir.
Thank you. I love you're very solid color right now. I'm a color block. I like a good color block.
And we got the matching mustaches. I mean, what a combination.
Did you do that knowing that I would have one?
Technically speaking, I can't grow the soul patch. So I tried as much as I can out of respect to you. And, obviously I came on wanting to squash the beef. You and I, we feuded in the past. We've had our drama. And, I have tremendous respect for you, I will say. And I will say, I grew up watching you, Fantano. So no matter what, bygones be bygones. I really respect you, and I have admiration for what you do. Obviously, I make art, and it's not always made for you or necessarily your demographic, and that's totally understandable. It's made for, all different types of people, and I think that's one thing I take pride in is making art something for everyone. It's not for every single person every time, but I'm just exploring the sonic spectrum and having so much fun, just tinkering and experimenting. And so much of the core of the Oliver Tree project was just to be able to never be pigeonholed and never be expected to do one thing. And I feel like that's something I take a lot of pride in. So even though not every song is made for you, maybe there's a song here and there, maybe that won't get worst pick of the week. And regardless, if they all do, who cares? It's all good. It's just a taste thing. And that's what makes art so good and so special is people feel vulnerable about it because it's a reflection of their tastes, So it's no good. There's nothing wrong with not liking any of my music or only liking one song or one album. I have no trials and tribulations with you critiquing things in the way that is your taste palette. That's something that I'll always admire your work as a critic. And just know I grew up on the full Nardwuar and Fantano kick. Those are when I think about what I grew up watching in the music space, I would eat cereal every day, wake up, and I would watch your reviews and I would watch Nardwuar's interviews. And so, it's an honor to be able to sit here with you today.
Thank you, sir. The beef, the argument, that happened. It's water under the bridge. And of course, I wanted to start off this interview on a good foot by, just opening things up and saying, firstly, I'm sorry. I apologize to you for the way that you acted on my stream.
And I'm sorry for the way that you acted on your stream. I think what people don't know this, but that was manufactured to an extent. We didn't talk about what it would be, but going into it, I was like, bro, we got to have a viral moment. And so it was very much fake. Although there was maybe things into it that bled into it that maybe, there's a little bit of you put a little bit of spice in there to make it feel a little bit real. But the truth is that was manufactured. Whether that became actually feeding into some real not liking me from that, I want you to know I'm sorry if there was anything where a line was crossed. But
no, I think there was. It was agreed upon that there would be a bit of a head-to-head. But
and that's what makes this entertainment, baby.
No, it's true. But it's not. That's not to say that there wasn't at least a little bit of actual feeling there. I think there was some real feeling.
Yeah, but that's how fake drama is fueled. You need to have a little bit to go off of. But my whole intention going into that was how do we make the biggest interview you've ever done? How do we make a moment out of all your interviews? And you've done so many amazing interviews with so many much more talented artists, so many incredible different creative people. How do we make something that kind of sticks out from that? That was the intention. I think we did that. I think it was that the clips went viral. It was an efficient thing. Although, it's like drama sells. I've made so much manufactured beef in my life. It's just, I'm like a wrestler. You know what I mean? And I often play the heel and I have no problem playing that character. Although at a certain point it can be frustrating because it's not everyone can always be on board with that. But it's entertainment. That's how I look at it. It's like,
and to be clear, to the audience, and 100%, 110% honest, you and your people have gone to this interview completely raw. No plan, no sort of like orchestrated anything whatsoever. You were just like, let's just talk.
Yeah, for sure. And dude, I worked so hard on this album, 3 freaking years. There's like a lot of people who interviewed me for this shit, and no one even like really talks about the music. And I feel like there's someone like you who actually, obviously you're well versed in reviewing stuff. And a lot of people they're like I did an interview a couple days ago. I'm not going to say names or anything like that, but it was something where I was like, it seems like your new album shows a whole new vulnerable side of you. And I was like, isn't that what every album is? I was just like shocked at some of the levels of, it was just like no research, didn't even probably listen to the album. And I know you might not have had a chance to give it a listen, but it doesn't matter. I'm just saying, I'm excited to talk about that at the very least. And this whole album cycle, I started kind of unveiling under the mask more, removing the character out. I mean, it can be a lot for people, and I totally get that. And, I wanted to show a little bit more of a human side as far as like the character is fun, and it's gotten to me where I wanted to get with it. But I think at a certain point, it kind of shuts things off for my potential, and it limits my range as someone who's a communicator as well as an entertainer, or just having a conversation. It's like, okay, what am I going to fight every single person? And I tend to fight people for fun. It's hard for me not to, because it's like, this is a normal conversation can be very dull and boring to me. But that being said, it's not true. That's just how my mind has been trained to think, because I love just making a moment. And I sometimes think that real life isn't enough, and I love to build some fantasy mixed in and blur those lines of where reality and where fantasy blend. And I have so much fun tiptoeing around that.
Okay. Well, in the process of kind of like, maybe pulling back the veil a little bit or turning down the character or the antics, what do you feel like you're revealing to audiences? What are audiences getting a glimpse of about you personally or emotionally that they weren't having access to before?
I would say in general, a lot of that era too. And when we did our interview, and like, there was a lot of anger within myself. So I kind of just like let that fuel the charge almost, especially, during that COVID period. It was in like a dark place for me. And so I just kind of like let that out into the chaos, into the performance of the promotion of the art. And I think now it's just, trying to humanize myself a little bit. And most people still, if they have a bad taste in their mouth, that's hard to sometimes clean out. But like, ultimately just to show that I'm also just a normal ass dude who just has a silly haircut. And, I'm really just like a workaholic. There's a lot of luck that's involved with having any moments of success. And in my whole life, it's just felt like one monumental failure after another. But, to show a little bit of a human side and not just playing the character's fun. And like I said, it's like, it did a lot for me, but there's certain levels where I think it limits me, and it turns a lot of people off. So I think ultimately hoping to make some people be able to see just a human component. But I will say the reason why I've been so heavy duty into that whole thing is it's hard for me to justify spending, like, let's call it 75% of my life doing the promotional side of this stuff. Cause like the music is the centerpiece, and I've dedicated my life to that. And each album I make, literally well over 100 songs. So there's no shortage of like pouring my heart and soul into the art. But the whole like process is you make the music, and then it's like a year and a half, maybe even 2 years of promoting this stuff. So it's like, in order for me to justify as an artist, and I consider myself an artist, for me to justify spending 75% of my time promoting stuff, I have to try to make an art piece out of it to justify why I'm even doing it. Because it's like, it's really, like I said before, it's not really about being an artist. It's about being an entertainer when you do this stuff. You know what I mean? And so when I make the rounds and have to promote and do the same interviews, thousands of the same questions, it gets so boring and so old. And ultimately, as an artist, I have to justify wasting so much time that could be spent making amazing stuff, or garbage stuff. Whether you like it or not is out of the conversation of what I'm getting at here. Is more just, it's something that allows me to justify the promotional, just bouncing around from, I've done 1,000 interviews, well over, I would assume, because the radio interviews, they send you through the blocks and you do like 15 a day. You know what I mean? it's hard to justify, oh yeah, this is what my life is, instead of like what you think as an artist is like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna create. It's like, cool, that's like a small functioning component, and yeah, it's got to be the centerpiece, and that's got to be really a priority. But on top of that, it's like, without getting the message across, or at least spreading some awareness, no one's gonna hear the art. And the whole thing of me dedicating a lifetime of energy to music is ultimately, I would like people to hear it and make some form of impact, whether, just getting it into people who do appreciate its hands, and to make the impact, because the goal of the project and myself is to bring some color to the world. A lot of people live in darkness. I've lived in darkness so much of my life. So the attempt is to try to bring some color into the world. And ultimately, yeah, it doesn't always go perfectly, and things tend to, sometimes rub people the wrong way. And whether that's my intention or not is usually the case is not, but I have a hard time not making performance art a centerpiece of an interview, because it's so fucking boring, Fantano. So many interviews, so much of the same questions, so much of the, so why did you call the album this? And not that I don't want to talk about that, because that is at the core of getting my message across, but it starts to feel very mundane and homogenized, and I'm like living in a Black Mirror episode of like, this never ending, just like, deja vu.
Okay. You've said a lot of stuff that I kind of want to rewind on, just because it's so much. Let me ask, do you genuinely feel like there is something about the character or the performance side about what you do that is a huge turnoff to people, or is not at least for you a net benefit in some way at the end of the day? Because I mean, across all streaming platforms, you do have tens of millions of monthly listeners, which I mean is a lot more than some artists who don't come at audiences with a character or whatever, or some kind of like, additional performance art piece. Like, are you talking about considering maybe turning down that element of your repertoire in order to make what you do more palatable? Or maybe when your average person runs across it, they don't think of it as maybe silly or maybe satire off the bat?
I think it's just, as I mature as an artist and as a human, it's about understanding the audience and understanding what they're there for. Because if I'm not dedicating the right focus on what the people who I'm performing in front of want, it's counter efficient of my time and then the person's time whose show I'm on or whatever it is. So it's like not about necessarily toning it down, but knowing when to turn it on and when to turn it off. Because I think ultimately there's a lot of times where I'm like, okay, this is just what I do. And then there's certain times where it's the audience, that's not what they're there to watch. So having a little more of a gauge as I mature a little bit to be like, maybe this isn't the time to do that. Or, knowing when I am in the scenario where it's the right time to do it, turn it up all the way to 11, and I'm not going to say it hasn't benefited from myself, but I think from the eyes of a viewer, of a critic, of like people who are like tastemakers, credible, cool, not to say there's not tons of people who have supported me over time, but I think in general, it's harder to be like, yeah, this is serious art when so much of my image is just purely a joke. So I can't like be upset when people are like, this isn't cool, whatever, because so much of my thing is just being uncool. And at the core of building the project out, that was the goal, was to not try to sell sex and not try to look attractive. It was just to look as ugly as possible, to make whatever was uncool cool. And I felt like that was such a cooler journey than trying to play off of being the cool guy, being the hot guy. So, I mean, it was part of a bigger picture as well. But it's worked. It's worked, and it's also worked against me just as much. But I think, yeah, the only reason I have, maybe, I don't know what the Spotify is, but like, let's say ballpark of 20 million monthly listeners, is the promotional aspects that the character has been an influential part in. So I can't say that didn't help. But as far as like, is the Grammys ever going to be like, yeah, this is cool, we want to support this? Like, probably not, unless I shifted things a bit. And I don't really care. I don't make stuff for accolades, but I'm just throwing that out there. It's like, it's hard for people like,
look, it possibly could at some point, no reason to rule it out. But I mean, also, like, even if you did get a Grammy at this point, what would that even do for you? I'm kind of surprised to kind of hear you, to hear you at least, like, thinking about some of the things that you're saying, because I feel like you're at the point in terms of reception and audience retention where you've kind of even transcended the necessity for any kind of tastemaker to hate on you or endorse you or whatever.
thank you for saying that. That's like the greatest compliment I could get from a tastemaker like yourself. And yeah, that's the thing. I'm not worried about trying to appease to try to be not even probably nominated, but just to get an invitation to the BMAs or whatever it is. It's like, I don't do this for that. So it's not the intention. I more just meant, even for someone like yourself, it's like, I'm a fan of you. Of course, I would love for you to be able to appreciate one song here or there that wouldn't get worst pick of the week. But if it doesn't, it's all good. And also, yeah, there's like things that it's hard to understand. It's like certain things. It's like, wow, this is so bad. It's like, yeah, I made that song for kids. That song is like a Disney Channel song. You know what I mean? Or this song here is like, it wasn't made for you. You know what I mean? And that's the thing that I do take pride in my journey as an artist is I've been kind of just exploring so much different stuff. And not all of it is necessarily going to be what would be considered cool or what most people would consider as, wow, this is really excellent stuff. You know, if it turns some people off, it's okay because it's opening up doors for new people. So I always am calculated enough to be like, well, this might not be necessarily like the thing I initially thought I would be getting into when I was going down this path. But when you think about inspiration, like for me, the goal is to inspire as many people as I can in this world. And ultimately, a lot of that takes place with inspiring the most malleable minds, which is the youth. And so as I've shifted, I've had to kind of tone things down, try to bring down swearing and bring down things for age restriction purposes on YouTube. And there's so much pitfalls in just censorship. But I have an awareness of, hey, there is kids watching this. And maybe, you know, this song is made for kids. Or even like, for example, I did an EP with Little Big, a Russian act. And a lot of my friends are like, what is this? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, that wasn't for you guys. We were trying to make something unique together that crossed over different mediums, different styles, different countries, you know? And like, that's one thing that some people overlook. They're like, man, this is so whack. It's like, well,
I'm kind of surprised that you saw that sort of reception because, I mean, you know, if anything, you guys share a similar sense of humor.
We do. And I consider them amazing friends and people I admire and some of my favorite things. But sonically, you know, we make different styles of music. We found a middle ground in that EP, but I'm saying a lot of people are like, what the hell? Like people saying, oh, like he fell off making this or that, or it's like he sold out. And it was so funny because around the time where people were saying I sold out was when Life Goes On happened around, which was a big TikTok song. For those of you who don't know what that was, it was a song that changed my life.
Right.
In the course of 2 months, I went from 0 TikTok followers to 10 million or something crazy. It was like an actual fundamental change in my whole entire existence, for better and much for worse. But ultimately, it was a thing that was a breakthrough moment in my career. People are like, this dude sold out. He's milking this thing. It's like, well, in order for me to take creative risks, which for me, the second album, which I know you were not the most inspired by, Cowboy Tears, that album was for me. That was so I could make something and get me through my darkest moment. And that was a really for myself. People are like, this dude sold out, because I'm like running all these remixes of Life Goes On and these different things. And people are like, man, he's just sold out. And I'm like, how? I just put out an album that is like pretty much not only alienating my own audience, but alienating future country fans or whatever it was. And it was really for me, I had to make that music because I'm actually an artist. And it's not a thing where I have to only do things because I think that's going to be the most successful thing. It's like, well, I also have to do stuff for my own self, for my own mental well-being, because music, and not to rant too much, but music is the thing that has saved my life multiple occasions. And, you know, music is the thing that's always there for me. It's the one friend that's always there. No matter how bad things are, I can go to music and music will always be there. So ultimately, I tend to go to it when I need it most. And I forget to take snapshots and moments when I do have those good times. This album, I took moments to try to take snapshots of falling in love, because I always forget to take snapshots and make music about that. I always am going to music when I need it, which is during the breakup moment or when the moments of when I'm dealing with my hardships in life. And I'm like, oh man, I can take negative energy and I can yield it into positive energy. And that's something that's so special about creation, and not to be like, you know, making this motivational speech, but I will say there's nothing better than going into a studio with the worst feelings ever and turning that into something that makes me dance and move and get so ecstatic, turning negative energy into positive energy and turning nothing into something that maybe doesn't exist and it's just sound waves. It's such a profound experience that I feel so lucky to have that, because I don't think I would be here. I certainly wouldn't be on this interview, but I don't know if I'd be on this planet if it wasn't for music. So I have multiple times in my life where it's saved my life. And I will say, I'm grateful to have that outlet.
You referenced the some of the themes of the album just a minute or so ago, talking about how a lot of these songs, especially the ones that you've teased toward the record with, are love songs. Is there a message? Because you were also alluding to this. Is there a message to the album that you want people to get? Because again, you were alluding over and over to like, I want people to get the message. I want people to hear the message. I want people to understand the message. Is there a message to this record beyond sort of being in love, or, you know, like essentially what is the thesis that you want people to understand coming away from this album?
So basically I've made 6 albums just to make this one. So it's evolved over many times. And the initial version was very depressing. It was so much darker, and it was so much more about loneliness, which at the core is still a huge theme. And for me, you can still have a concept album that doesn't necessarily have to be just purely about what I referenced lyrically, but it's about the way that the videos are made, the story that's being told with those. It's also about the album title and the concept that I'm kind of driving in. So this album is called Alone in a Crowd. And it started in the middle of Cowboy Tears. Cowboy Tears, I got bored in the middle of it because I was kind of putting so much rigid rules on what I could do that I couldn't include a rap verse, or I couldn't include stuff, because I wanted to take a swing at making something that was a more cohesive body of work. After the first album, Ugly is Beautiful, it was a selected works, which is essentially what I've done with this, where I just picked all my favorite songs that I made over that period of time, and recognizing that people don't really listen to albums. They listen to singles. So kind of gearing it over for that mindset. But ultimately, to answer your question, Alone in a Crowd, at the core, the messaging that has been the concept is, in this process of this album, it started, 3 years ago in the middle of Cowboy Tears. And that was right around the time where Life Goes On had this tremendous success. And I found alienation the further that the fame, which, some people could beg to differ, but ultimately when you get 10 million followers in a period of a few months, I thought it was fake. And then when I came back from Africa, I was in Morocco and Egypt mixing my album Cowboy Tears. I came back and things had changed dramatically. And I felt the more that happened, the more isolated I became, the more Rapunzeled in I became. And what I found was that's not a relatable thing, right? Like very few people will ever experience that. But what is a lonely thing? It's like ultimately.
I mean, we did just recently come out of pretty isolated times.
Yes,
and everything.
Did. And this was made during that period as well. So
right. So I mean, could be fairly relatable.
Yeah, the celebrity and fame aspect isn't, though, for most people. Although there is an American dream that's shifted into wanting to be an influencer or something like that. But
yeah, and on top of it, like, and again, not to argue the point too much, but like, a dude like Drake sells that angle constantly. You hear nothing about, you hear nothing else other than like how sad it is and how lonely it is at the top, and people just like line up to gobble it up every time. Right.
Well, that's something I'm not super well versed in what he makes music about, but as an artist, I have to make art to be able to deal with my own stuff and to get me through my immense suffering. As a human, we all suffer, it's part of the human experience. So for me, I want to make something that, yes, helps me get through that, but also the goal is to make something that is relatable and can connect with people. And so I was like, okay, that story isn't necessarily that relatable, the idea of like fame. But what I will say is what it made me feel was lonely. So I really wanted to highlight that and lean into that, because no matter who you are, we all feel lonely, whether you are the most popular quarterback on the team, or whether you're a theater kid and don't feel like people bully you, whatever it is, we all feel lonely. And even people who have a partner, they go to bed with their own thoughts in their head every night. So there's a lonely component to being a human. We kind of experience this it's in our own head. It's in our own lens. We're all living as the star in our own movie, or, whatever scenario you want to describe it as. But anyways, I wanted to make something because I want to inspire people. I want to make something that's relatable. So I was realizing how lonely I had become. And this was, like you said, during COVID. And so that played a huge factor as well. But yeah, basically I wanted to make something that would remind us that, yeah, sure, you may feel lonely, but if you look around, most of us and all of us are or have been lonely. So it's a reminder that this thing is a universal feeling. And when you think about it that way, it makes life a little bit less lonely. So that was kind of the message I wanted to highlight. And I talk about it in songs like Invisible Man, or there's certain moments where I highlight that, but so much of the initial album, which was about that, had shifted because I had just come out of making a breakup album and a depressive album. And I'm like, great, now what am I doing? Making another breakup album here? It's like I wanted to explore other things. And as I made more iterations of the album over, I think I made 127 songs, some crazy number like that. And after the thing shifts, I'm like, I really want this to document and take a snapshot of what I always forget to take, which is the beautiful things. And I realized that even though you can still be with someone else and be alone together amongst the crowd. So there's many ways it can be looked, and not to get too into every angle and every perspective, but I still felt it applied to this mission. And, in the music videos, which I write and direct and produce, it's like the vision with some of that stuff was using the runway, the fashion kind of angle of like, putting yourself out there and having people judge you for it. And like having people constantly kind of like, be judging whatever you do. And that's okay. That's how the world works. But ultimately that just creates the more isolation, the more loneliness. So it was I touched on it in different ways, but using kind of the runway as a metaphor for putting yourself out there.
Yeah. I mean, in what other ways, I guess, do you feel like, for this new phase of, your career, this album cycle, in what other ways do you feel like the visual components and the music video, I say, having just recently watched the link that your team sent me for the music video for With You, in what other ways do you feel like you're adding to the narrative of this new album cycle through the videos and through the visuals? Are there things that you're able to communicate and get across in the music videos that you don't feel like you're able to put in the songs?
For sure. There's a lot that can't be said through words. And I think primarily, although music is something that I've been more focused on through the earlier part of my life, because filmmaking is expensive. I still would just film videos growing up as a kid. So it's always been part of my background. Both the two I made, but I think ultimately I consider myself leaning more towards the visual side. So music's a great day job and I love doing it and I treat it with the utmost respect for the craft. But that being said, if there wasn't the chance to make music videos, I think I would be a lot less excited and inclined to go through these rigorous album cycles of promotion, because the music videos is where I get to really play in the sandbox as far as, being able to make the visual content. The sonic content, you don't need much money to do that. But the music videos, we're talking about millions of dollars of investment that I have to pay back on 10 cents to the dollar. So it's very expensive for me to make this stuff. It's always putting me deep into a hole, but I don't care because I want to make something special. So to answer your question, the music videos are all part of one film, essentially.
Right.
They're all part of this different people. They're basically the same guy, but living in different timelines. So you get a chance to, in the live show, see a mixture of how these all play out as one story. So it's given me a chance to develop what a lot of people are referring to as the Oliverse, but the universe of this whole kind of thing, and tying in so many different characters and different things. But there's a lot of motifs that reemerge throughout all the albums and all the different music videos. And if you go to one of my concerts, I've developed a show that's a mixture of a movie, a TV show, a play, a concert, stand-up comedy, motivational speaking, WWE wrestling, and of course some scooter stunts. So it's fusion entertainment 360. But the thing that's really exciting is, as I've developed these videos more, I get to kind of write the whole thing in reverse because I now know how it evolves and what it is. And I get to kind of write the music videos with the intention of this bigger piece. And what is exciting about the show is I wrote a 35-page screenplay and filmed all these missing gaps that connects the music videos together as one story, and really ties the world together in a way that I think is unique. You're never going to recreate the wheel, and I'll never do something that's so innovative and changing the game. But like, I feel like I'm doing something very special here and something very unique, and I'm very proud of that. And when you get a chance to see some of these videos, they're all they weren't released in order necessarily, but they play together in a way. At least the trilogy, which you saw today With You, that's the third final installment of this trilogy. And I released other ones out of order and the wrong thing. I was like all over the place based on needs for what the label needs me to do and certain expectations that I have to not, I had to save the best, or like a video that I think is really strong for the end where I spend a bunch of money. So I had to like mix up the order of it all. But that being said, so proud of the way that the whole cinematic universe comes together with these new videos, and you get to see it a little bit more like a movie, you know, when I'm writing them to be written specifically to be played back to back like that. I think that's pretty unique, and I love the way that it's kind of come together as an experience when you get the chance to see the show and sit down and watch it all. And I will say, lastly, I even put you in the live show. I gave you just a little mini shout out. You gave me a in the show. It just gives the reviews at the beginning, and I put you in there just as to give me an incredibly low review. And it's a tip of the hat because it's all good. It's all love. And it was more inspired by, like you said, the universe that you've been part of. And I've been even part of your little universe, and you've been part of my little universe. And we've both kind of played ways, positive, negative, whatever, weaved in and out of them. And just know that it's with the utmost respect that I give you even a mini little shout out in the show. And it's not, I want you to know, and I can take it out if you don't want that in there, but it's something I thought was fun. You know what I mean? To be like throwing a nod to the Anthony fart face, you know, and the meme of it and leaning into it and just giving kind of, because I put the reviews at the beginning of everyone shredding it. And I'm like, I love playing with that, you know, being more critical of myself even than any critic could be, because ultimately, although I'm the biggest fan of this art and it's made to my taste, I'm the biggest critic. You think you want to shred this stuff. You don't think I want to shred it. I'm like, you should see how it's looked in my head. You saw that video. I'm like, this shit looks so bad compared to how it's supposed to look. It looks beautiful still. Incredibly proud. But like, there's limits on budget. There's limits on timelines. And like, yeah, it looks like shit compared to how I seen it. The music sounds like shit compared to how I hear it in my head. So I'm a bigger critic than you could ever even imagine. You know what I mean? Like way more harsh on myself than you could ever be. So I welcome any criticism, and I lean into that being self-deprecative, and I explore that in my art.
I wanted to ask you, as far as like, you know, the visual narratives go in this, you know, music video series, like, you know, what made you sort of like, you know, and I'm not talking about sort of the fact that you may have like kind of multiple characters or actors in a piece that are sort of like dressed like you. Obviously, that's sort of been like a bit of a theme ongoing for a while. But like, you know, what is the specific intent behind having literal multiple Olivers, you know, sort of like in the universe together, where, you know, you have obviously the new and improved kind of Oliver 2.0, 3.0 at this point, where you have the new hairdo, the new coat, the new everything. But then you also have like this smaller miniature version of yourself that you're also sort of like, you know, in cahoots with. Like, you know, what does that sort of like dynamic between multiple yous kind of represent in this, you know, visual universe?
Well, I can't give too much away because it gets deeper into that through the concerts, and when you see the full show, it makes more sense. But for example, in the song Essence, which I released as the third music video, which was sequentially out of order and actually part of the end of the show of that chapter, you know, like in the song, it talks about it, it's like, baby, you're my essence. Without you, I'm nothing. And instead of that being just, you know, shown purely as a love song, I was talking about it through the character. And you know, that video specifically is about a character, someone who woke up and chose violence, you know, acted on intrusive thoughts, and karmically at the end kind of let's just say it doesn't play in their favor. You know, the karma comes back to bite them. And there's a lot of different things you could get out of that video. But one of them specifically was, he's, you know, referencing, you know, it's like, without you, I'm nothing. Without Turbo, as he pushes him down, it's like, well, without Turbo, there was no Cornelius Cummings, which is the character of the third album, you know, and Shawnee Bravo, which is the cowboy character. There's all these things where I'm basically giving a chance to connect the dots in the actual movie that you see it in the concert. So you start to see how it all kind of plays together. And I already know how the fifth video is, or the sixth, not video, but album, how it plans out. I can't really give away too much, but it's building blocks to showing a longer, bigger picture that will all intertwine later. You know what I mean? I can't really give away the ideas.
So when you say the character, you're not just talking about one singular character who's the same from album to album. You're sort of like embodying a different character, but there's like maybe a series of like visual or aesthetic limitations, or not limitations, but sort of like characteristics that you will carry with you from album cycle to album cycle. Because, as I'm sort of like, watching you kind of evolve into these different phases of your career, artistically and visually, I'm seeing, yes, obviously, things are changing and, you're presenting yourself in a very different way than you were like back in 2020. But also on top of it, it feels like there are elements of the first album cycle that have carried over into the second, and there are elements of the second in terms of how you look and how you present yourself that have also carried over into the third, but obviously that's sort of morphed into its own thing. And it seems almost like, you're snowballing here. It's like, you're picking up and gathering certain things and, growing larger and growing bigger while also carrying what sort of brought you to this point with you along the way.
Yeah, that's a good, astute observation. I think ultimately, like I said, I try not to pigeonhole myself or set too many boundaries. But for example, two things that come to mind is as I'm developing characters and making different looks for each album, I have some very basic rules. And one of them, and that may change at one point, but one of them is bangs and the straight hair like this. So I've been exploring the different options and the various ways of that. And the other is the ski jacket or the turtleneck type of look. And so as I've gotten further on, as I've been able to have more financial support on my creative visions, I get to design the looks myself and be really hands-on with, down to every micro detail. And so as I develop more things and design more looks, I get to kind of play with the limitations of these things because, I think you could have endless sounds and endless things. There has to be certain levels, certain rules that are set for something to be somewhat cohesive. Like for my music, I have a strict rule that with the styles that I'm exploring, I don't ever want to have the song slowly fade out. Like that seems like an obvious thing in pop space, but it's one of my rules. There's times where people who I collaborate with, they're like, we should make it like that. It's like, no, that's not part of the style. It doesn't fit with the rules I've set. And every rule is meant to be broken, but there's certain ones where I stand firm on. Like for me, every lyric and every melody has to be written by me. That's a firm rule so that I can maintain a semblance of this being Oliver Tree, And I'm not saying there won't be a day where I change things up as far as looks wise. I hope I always stay intact my vision that, hey, this music was actually written by me. Otherwise, I'm like, who is Oliver Tree and what the hell is he doing here? So I have some strict rules. Like another one is like all the music that I put on my album, I have a hand in producing. And on this album, I produced some stuff even entirely by myself. And I can make beats. I can do all kinds of stuff. I'm just not particularly excited by it because I spent so many years in my early part of my career before I even really launched the Oliver Tree Project, where I just made album after album by myself. And it was an incredibly lonely experience. And I found it's much more fun to make music with my best friends than to be sitting by myself in a room messing around. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And I applaud people who are fully making every aspect by themselves. But I kind of found, hey, I'm not the most excited by sound design as much anymore. I'm not as excited by beat making. I can still be instrumental in producing without even a computer, even though I can be very hands-on with Ableton and be working on Pro Tools proficiently enough that I can get my vision across. But the traditional term of a producer did not touch a computer. Those before even computers, they were just hands-on with the vision side of things. And so as I went more into the traditional role as a producer and moved away from engineering and having to do fully having my fingers hitting every single key command to short cue and record myself and do everything. As I've gotten further, I said, okay, I want to focus in on certain components that I enjoy more. And beat making is fun, but I lost the love for it. I used to be obsessed with Jay Dilla and obsessed with crate digging and finding one snare from a Madlib song and finding one snare from some Wu-Tang instrumental and chopping it up and making full drum, sorry, I'm drawing a blank right now, but just, making my sound library so intensively, I would spend hours upon hours. And I realized as I got older, I'm like, yeah, maybe that will come another day. But at this point, there's other things I'm more excited by and not to tangent. But the one thing I will say is this album I'm really proud of because I played 80% of the instruments on it. I feel like, and the thing is, yeah, it's simple stuff. It's not mind blowing, but it's very hard to make something simple that's good. That's like the challenge with pop music. And the amount I evolved as a guitar player, as a piano player, as a bass player on this album, I'm so proud of just for my self-growth as a songwriter. And can I say one other thing? Sorry, I'm not really giving much room for you. speak, but I wanted to share this. So during this process of this album, I went back to school and I learned so much. I felt my first time in a while falling in love with learning again. And I went to work with some of the biggest pop producers of our generation,
Going back to school for what specifically? Just like art
learning how
school?
to write pop songs. No,
Okay, okay.
just not the actual school of it, but the school of life. And I
Okay.
went and worked with these top notch people who have some of the records for some of the biggest pop songs, the most number one hits, blah, blah, blah. And I went with these people and did a bunch of sessions, and I would literally put a notepad together and I would write down that person's name and then write rules after it. And then I would catalog what these people's rules were. Every rule is meant to be broken. These people, they break their own rules from time to time, but they had specific stuff that were guidelines that they work under. And so I was just soaking up the game of it and just learning from them. And I made a bunch of music with them. But what I found was it's a numbers game. And if you make hundreds of songs, I'm much more likely that I'll be making that song that one day with just my friends. So none of those songs even were put on the album particularly. And it ended up just being me learning all these crazy tricks and rules from the Max Martin school of thought and these different camps that come from the biggest world of pop. And then I would apply it to the music I made with my friends. And there was something that was kind of exciting for me to try to make an album that was my attempt at pop. Although it's left of center and it's, you could critique, oh, this music's too short. It's like, well, it's inspired by punk music in that context. And I wanted the songs to be short, and fans would say, oh, this is too short. It sounds the same as the demo. And I'm like, that wasn't the demo. That was a song somebody leaked out illegally. That was the version. I just kept working on the mixes and re-recording things and whatnot. So anyways, not to tangent, but I'm very proud of this record in the side of me as a producer, as a pop songwriter, and as an instrumentalist. These kind of things I take a lot of pride in, and I know that that's not going to change the way people perceive it because it makes no difference. It's all about the end result. But it was a breakthrough for me, finding the way that the dots connected.
You talk about collaborating and working with your friends on the music with this record, but also obviously taking on the lion's share of performing the instrumentation on the LP. To what who are these people who you've worked with for the bulk of the record, and what exactly, as the process kind of developed, ended up being like their input, or what roles did they play in the creative process of the album?
Well, I think really it comes down to one person who's been probably my biggest collaborator from the beginning, and that's Weathen. And during the process of this album, me and Weathen lived together. I only lived in one place for 1 year out of the last 6 years, and that was during COVID. And me and Weathen, we rented a house together, and we had a studio there. Me and my friends worked with my dad and built a vocal booth, and we had this setup where we were just recording hundreds of songs. So me and Weathen, through that process, then we moved out of the house. We stayed at Airbnbs a month at a time. Then we went to Brazil. We went to Miami. We went to a bunch of different places together. And I made music with some other core friends that were just as influential on the stuff that pushed the needle, but maybe didn't make the album, like my friend Casey Matson, who grew up down the street. And I made songs like Alien Boy with him, and Ahmad Royal as well. We kind of made a sequel to Alien Boy, which is Invisible Man, which is made with the same three people, but kind of a new version of something, exploring somewhere else with some juke influence type beats. But nonetheless, Weathen at the core was my main collaborator. And the roles that me and him play and why we're such a good collaboration is that we're yin and yang. Weathen is an incredible beat maker. Weathen is an incredible sound designer. I found that I'm not as excited about sound design. I used to be obsessed and do sound collage and record all of the sounds in my kitchen and make beats with that and make instruments, and MIDI would be played through sounds that I could find around me. But I found I lost that love for it. And I realized I just want to play the instruments. So Ethan would make some sounds. I would be able to play them. Ethan would be able to make a beat, and I would be able to play the instruments around it and write the song around it. So it became something where we both have opposite strengths, and that collaboration worked well for me because it allowed me to really focus in on the instruments. And other people, like my friend Casey Matson, such a great instrumentalist, a genius virtuoso jazz musician. But then it's like, okay, well, what I found was I kind of wanted to be playing the piano myself. So it ended up not making as much sense in this context of this album. But those are people that really stand out. And then Jacob, my engineer, who me and him mixed the album together. He's ultimately the mixer on the album, but I also mixed this stuff as well with him. And we spent 3 months in Brazil finishing this album and recording songs there. And, trying to get a little more of a cohesiveness on the sound, even though there's songs made in London and Abbey Road Studios, and there's songs made in, like I said, Miami with other people. It's like, I feel like there's a cohesiveness just with the way that the music's approached. Whereas Ugly is Beautiful, I didn't have an engineer, and it was like a nightmare chasing down all these things with different effects and processing and getting the right versions. And it became a headache. And now we've streamlined that process to make it at least a little bit less headache.
I wanted to ask you, before maybe I dive into some of the content of the songs from the record that I've heard so far, about sort of like your feelings personally as, I guess, not a director, not a musician or anything like that, but maybe just kind of simply as a content creator. Because I feel like the way you kind of came up, with like this involvement in and, kind of dabbling in internet memes and the meme community and like, what Vine was doing at the time, that has like, and short form video content in general has like very much evolved into, like what we're now seeing in the TikTok space, YouTube Shorts. And obviously with your millions of followers over there, you're seeing success, in that lane too. And at the time that you were like, blowing up as not just a musician, but somebody who had like, this content that was popping off on Vine too, in the music space, that was kind of a rarity, but like now in the age of TikTok, like being a new artist who is savvy when it comes to short form content and doing, these quick little, hits and internet memes and so on and so forth, like, TikTok has now become like the foundry for breaking new artists and breaking new talent who, I think whether they're conscious of it or not, are kind of like working off of a rubric that in a way you sort of like paved the way for, given again, that internet savvy that you brought to the table, but also, what you were doing on the musical end too. Like, do you feel any type of way about, the way that you sort of like developed your personality and developed, your music brand? Do you feel any type of way about that becoming more and more of the norm? And do you feel like this is kind of like bearing out when it comes to bringing some cool and interesting music to the table? Like, do you see new and intriguing talent in the music space on TikTok on a regular basis when you do happen to be over there?
That's a great question. And first of all, thank you for acknowledging any mild contributions. I'm not going to say I had any hand in doing any influential stuff as far as developing things.
I mean, influence is one thing that we could talk about, but you were definitely like ahead of the curve on it. You know what I mean?
And I'm not. Yeah, that's not even the interesting part of it. But I wanted to acknowledge that. So thank you for saying that. But I will say this. The only reason I did that was because I had already spent 10 years of my life working so hard on music and nobody cared. And that was the only thing that I found moved the needle. And that was 6 years ago. So it was a means to an end. I didn't start out being a content creator. I became a content creator after being a musician.
Well. To the point that you're making there, I think a lot of young artists are also finding the same thing. How many young artists are out there finding that they're making a successful music career just simply off of making and producing songs, and that's it, and doing nothing else?
Probably zero. Right.
Yeah. And so I mean, they're gravitating to the same thing for the same reasons that you did.
Yeah, and now it's even more hard to cut through the noise because it's so oversaturated, and it already was oversaturated then. You could always probably argue that ever since there's been a music industry after the first 10 years, it's probably been oversaturated, just various different ways that it was consumed. But
sure.
Main point being is this kind of a shame, I'll say. And then not that I feel like I had any negative influence, but I think it was already going there regardless. That's why I was a means to an end. But like, for example, I have so much love for making music videos. And now I feel like the music video is dead. I think that this With You video is likely going to be the last music video I ever make, at least one on this scale, because nobody's consuming content that way. They want to just see a cell phone video with some stupid video, like whatever it is. They don't want to see a manufactured piece of production that I consider, for me, like what I love doing so much. It's kind of almost become extinct in a way. And I feel like the music video as we see it now is obsolete. And it's a shame that it's reached this point, because I consider myself a music video artist, but like it's dead, bro. It's over. Like it seems like, and I'm hoping this is all going to be something that shifts, and we're always changing climates. But as it seems now, we're living in the short form, and we thought music videos was the short form. Obviously albums are like completely pointless in another context. That's another conversation for another time. But like, I'm kind of bummed on it all, to tell you the truth, because I don't want to sit around having to be filming TikToks as a 30-year-old man. But the thing is, that's the labels are obsolete. They don't know what to do. They're just like post TikToks. And so it's the whole thing is so like archaic now. And the gatekeepers of people who are really at the front line of like making culture connect are more on the influencers side. And so it's like they're the ones who move the needle. You're just like hoping some TikToker is going to share something that has a trendable enough thing. It's sad that this is what it's come to. I'm not happy about the state, but you can't sit around glooming about it and being like, oh man, why does it have to be this way? It's like you just got to roll with the punches and go with it and try to adapt. And that's something I've always tried to do over the course of this project. When I launched Oliver Tree, it's always been, how do I adapt? How do I figure out, okay, Vine's dead. What's next? Oh, Instagram's dying. Okay, what's next? Okay, TikTok is not having the same effect. All right, when trying to figure out what's next and try to maintain what is now more importantly than anything.
I mean, look, I can't I'm not Nostradamus. I can't tell the future or anything like that, but I can say, at least from my experience as a TikToker, I have been seeing the platform like try to push longer form content and push people on the platform to do that through like the 3-minute videos, the 10-minute videos, the so on and so forth. And I'm sort of wondering, like, do you think instead of the music video dying, it's just going to go from like this to this? And then that's going to be the music video.
Well, I think you bring up an amazing point, because the short form is getting longer as we're seeing it, but but the production value isn't expanding. It's more about rawness. We've moved out of like a 6ix9ine era with like the manufactured beef. That's why I'm like kind of got to go with where things are going, because people are less interested on overproduced content. They want something more relatable, something that, and it's been that way. Even when I was really getting into it, it was like cell phone videos would be the things that go viral. But back in that day, and I think there's always room for a great song moves the needle, and a video can be a big deal still and change the face of a song. But it's kind of like the labels are like, we shouldn't even make a video unless the song is already blowing up, because that's when it really makes the difference. But I'm a visual artist, so I'm like, we kind of need to make videos, otherwise there's no real. That's my goal.
That's kind of weird, because how many songs have gotten huge over the years over a music video or a visual or whatever?
Right. I think it was an instrumental thing. And then as it sits now, it's more like, oh, the song can move, the sound, the 6 seconds of the sound can move on TikTok. And now the music video has the difference between taking the song from here or take it up and elevate it. So it still can be very effective, but it's less and less effective for the rollout campaign and more about the long play if something is starting to kind of connect.
I wanted to ask you, given that you were kind of referencing some of this earlier about, your audience, you're several more years deep since we last talked into this, like, successful music career journey where you're creating and you're entertaining and so on and so forth. And you have many more followers and listeners than you did when we last spoke. And I wanted to know if, like, through this growth and through this experience, what has your sense become of like who the Oliver Tree audience is? Because you speak about like making certain songs with certain people in mind. This song is for this group of people. This song is maybe more for kids. This song is maybe more for that. Like, who is the average Oliver Tree listener, and how do you feel like you're able to successfully or unsuccessfully, and I know you have to go soon, so this will maybe be the last thing that we talk about. Sort of like keep all of these people, these tens of millions of people, under this umbrella where you're kind of like, keeping all of them hopefully entertained at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, you'll never please everybody, so that's short answer. To answer the first part of your question, it's a really great question, because I have no freaking clue. And I say, oh yeah, I make this song for kids, but I also put out Fairweather Friends, where I talk about my experience as a weed dealer, going from, dime bags to selling pounds of weed, and talking about hanging out with, porn stars and stuff like that. So it's not
at Michelin star restaurants. And look, you say, and it is true, you can't please everybody all the time, but in terms of like general popularity in the mainstream music industry, you do please more people than most. You please more people than most.
Well, I think the thing is that I'm not worried about everybody all the time. And when you ask me who is an Oliver Tree fan, it's like, I have no freaking clue. Nobody, probably. I'm like thinking about now, like the larger vision of it. It's like, how do I connect with it's not about necessarily just wanting to please the fans. And when I say that, I also want to say this album I made more like Ugly is Beautiful, the diversity, and showed the range, because it seemed like that's what connected at the core. But that being said, it's like I'm worried more about the new people and trying to get people who are not familiar with the music to find the new stuff, because if you like the old stuff, you can always enjoy that. You don't have to like the new stuff. I want you to enjoy the new stuff, but if you don't, it's all good, because the old stuff still exists. So like the way I see it is that, you know, people grow with you or they grow out of you, but that doesn't mean they necessarily have to grow out of the old things. And if they do, that's fine. We're constantly changing. I think about middle school, obsessed with AC/DC. When was the last time I put on AC/DC, let alone any song? I don't even listen to music, but like, you know, it's been since middle school. That was part of my growth, and it's a nostalgic door that takes me back. And, you know, I hope my music can do the same for other people. But the truth is, like, your guess is as good as mine. The one thing I know is that when I see my shows, I've got the most eclectic mixture. I've got little kids, I've got grandparents, like a grandma with a pink bowl cut. I've got people who are 20 years old, people that are 40 years old. I've got people who are jocks, and I've got people who are very much queer, and like the weirdest, randomest range of people that shouldn't belong together and somehow become unified through an eclectic mixture of art and entertainment, whether that's comedy or whether that's songs that can make you cry. It's really just, you know, your guess is as good as mine. I don't know. And, you know, obviously not you. You're not the demographic, you know what I mean? But I hope I can make one song who can inspire even you, Fantano. That's the dream, you know, just one.
You know, I have a feeling there will be some songs that'll inspire me on this record. Quick before you go, what are we looking out for in the near future? The Without You video, the tour dates. Let us know where to look, what to look out for. You know, what is everybody waiting for who's watching right now?
So yeah, the With You video will drop tomorrow morning. The album comes out tonight at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, midnight on the East Coast for you. Yeah, world tour. I leave to Bali, Indonesia tomorrow, going across Australia, Europe, all these different places. And then I will be potentially opening up some more tour dates. I can't say too much at this moment in time. But world tour, taking the show around to show, basically, you know, investing every penny I have into the show, which isn't making any money, but is the dream show. And I'm super proud of that. So those are the main things. And the other thing I want to say is it's a shame that we don't have more time, because I feel like I would have loved to talk to you for 1 more hour, 2 more hours. I have to do this interview with NPR, but I want to say this.
Yeah, I think we could have gone longer.
Thank you for your questions. I wish we could continue the conversation, and maybe we can at another point, because I feel like you're someone that has not just amazing questions, but you understand the skate so much more than any interviewer that I get the chance to talk to. So thank you for your insightful questions. Sorry I ranted too much, because I would have loved to hear more of them.
You ranted a perfect amount. Have fun with NPR.
Thank you, brother. You're amazing.
And don't give them too much of a hard time.
I won't. And I just want to say, even if you didn't like the last album, thank you for even giving it the time of day. So my hat's off to you, sir.
And thank you for making music, regardless of whether or not I like it, that's worth actually talking about and engaging with. So
thank you. Have an amazing day. And I look forward to hopefully speaking again soon.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye.